Hi, folks. It's been said in the last few years that the conservative movement didn't have enough women in a leadership post. I find it fascinating that that may have been true a few years ago. But if you look at the current scenery, what you'll find is that we have women leaders all throughout the conservative movement, whether it's Christian Hawkins with Students for Life or Lila Rose with Catholic, with her organization, her Right to Life organization, Tracy Sharp with the State Policy Network, on and on the list goes. But when I'm asked by people who are the important people and who to watch for, the answer is my guest today. Jessica Anderson was with the Trump administration. We're going to ask her about that. But she has come on with Heritage Action and is suddenly at the forefront of every major debate taking place. At a time when the conservative movement is looking for leaders, she is a leader of the conservative movement. So, Jessica, it's so much fun for me to be able to talk to you today. I want to ask you first, tell me something about yourself. What is it that led you to the helm of Heritage Action?
Well, Brent, first, thank you so much for having me today. It's an honor to be with you and to be tackling these incredibly important issues that our country is facing. And we're doing that at Heritage Action. And what led me here after serving in the Trump administration is I wanted to be in the fight. I saw how difficult it is from within government to affect conservative change and realized that a main driver of that is actually from the outside in, from the grassroots conservative movement all across the country, pushing on elected officials to do the right thing, to follow through on their campaign promises, and to actually represent Americans, everyday average Americans just like me. And I wanted to be in the fight, and taking the helm at Heritage Action was a way for me to do that. So I'm grateful to be here.
What did you do with the Trump administration?
So I had the privilege of serving at the Office of Management and Budget, which is one of the most powerful tools that the president has at his disposal, both from a policymaking standpoint with the budget and a regulatory standpoint with, as we all recall, President Trump's very aggressive deregulatory agenda. So I managed a little-known division called the Legislative Review Division, which was tasked with this responsibility of making sure all of the agencies spoke with one voice, the president's voice, when it came to policy. So it was no easy task, but I loved it. I worked for Mick Mulvaney, Russ Vought, legends in the conservative movement, and learned a lot from each of them as well.
I think a real legacy of Donald Trump was how he ran the executive branch as a businessman. He really did put the top-notch people in government to enact his agenda. And I think at the end of the day, when the Biden team came in, I think they said, my God, we have a lot of work to do to undo all the damage that was done by Donald Trump. So you know, it was wonderful that you were there. Okay, so you went to Heritage Action. What did you see when you came to Heritage Action? When you looked at the conservative movement from the perch of Heritage Action, how did you see the movement?
Well, the movement is very diverse. The good thing about conservatives is we all have deeply held belief systems that then drive what we do on a day-to-day basis and what sort of policies we support. And so the conservative movement is certainly diverse in our thinking, but we're unified, I think, in two main ways. One, we see that the freedoms afforded and defined by the founders are something worth fighting for. And we're willing to use that lens to approach any public policy issue today, whether it's big tech, whether it's the fight against China, whether it's the deregulatory and economic agenda, securing our elections, fighting against critical race theory, whatever it is. That's the lens by which we look at those issues. So that unifies us. And the second thing that unifies, I believe, the conservative movement is our efforts right now to fight the left. We have seen just how destructive the progressive left is to our American institutions and how they have infiltrated every single corner of American society. And when you see that and you feel that as a mom, as a parent, as someone with school-age children, looking at CRT now, someone fighting for our election integrity, as you feel that, you realize we have to fight the left at every corner of this debate. We can't just cede territory because we don't like that person, or maybe we're nervous about tackling some of these difficult issues like critical race theory. No, we have to take it head on. And I think the movement is very much unified in its fight against the left right now. And that's what I've seen at Heritage Action. It's what I've seen traveling the country the last year and a half, talking to our grassroots activists and trying to get us to move forward in these two buckets. How do we preserve our freedom and how do we fight the left?
About 2 months ago, you had that story about the Utah school board meeting, where a mother spoke up and so eloquently took on the school board. And then the next day, I think it was in North Carolina, something similar like that happened. And I told my staff then, watch for this to happen. Watch what's going to happen, because this is the counter-revolution that's about to emerge. When you have something as spontaneous as that, something is going to happen. The left, I believe, Jessica, they're not liberals, they're not progressives, they're not leftists, these are Marxists. This is a neo-Marxist movement. This is what makes them so dangerous, is that this is not George McGovern and radicalism of the 1970s. This is not Bill Clinton. This is not even Barack Obama. These people don't want to make America. They don't want to remake America. They want to destroy America. That's what the 1619 Project is all about. CRT is all about. The whole transgenderism thing is meant to dissolve the Judeo-Christian tradition in America. That's what we're facing. And I think it's fascinating that at the school board level, parents are rising up and saying no more. And fighting back. And I think it's going to catch on like wildfire. And that's where the conservative movement should be focusing its attention. So I feel very good about that. But then there is the big issue. And before we get into the big issue, I want to touch on something that you just said, because it's important. Big tech. I think the big tech censorship effort is worldwide. I think it's the biggest threat to freedom in history. Because it is Silicon Valley deciding what are the principles under which man should live worldwide, or not be allowed to communicate, which has never happened before. Heritage took a very bold and public stance, and in so doing, was making an acknowledgement of a negative. But really turned things around and showed real leadership. Can you explain what happened?
We have heard from our grassroots activists, from Heritage members, from everyone that is involved in the Heritage Network across the country for well over 2 years now, that the fight against big tech falls in 3 buckets: censorship, data collection, and privacy. Those 3 things are what is top of mind. Now, of course, there's other things. There's the politicization of the FTC and whether or not they can weaponize big tech against us. But those 3 are the building blocks. And so we at Heritage, we were realizing that part of this, we can't treat this fight as business as usual. It can't just be, well, we're with you on some issues, but not on other. And so we made the decision that we will no longer accept any financial contribution or financial partnership from any firm, company, enterprise that would qualify as big tech. And it's a long list, Brent, and it's not exhaustive. I bet we'll probably add other companies to it as we continue to learn more. But the truth is that the conservative movement, Heritage in particular, is not beholden to big tech in any way, and therefore there's not a partnership. And part of that partnership previously was giving donations to our research. We no longer accept those funds. We're proud to turn those funds away, and we would encourage others to do the same. And that is one step that we can take as part of the conservative movement fighting back against big tech is not to allow their dollars to cloud the judgment policy process really in any way. So I'm proud of the pledge. I'm proud of us saying no to big tech money, and then we will continue to research the best possible ways to tackle those three things: censorship, data collection, and privacy.
Yeah, I was so proud of Heritage for what Heritage did. As a matter of fact, when we saw this, we turned it to the next step, and through our Free Speech Alliance, we called on the conservative movement to follow in your lead. And to do the same thing. And we've got 40-some organizations that also then agreed to do it. That's very good, but it should be 100% of the conservative movement. And anyone who is still receiving money from these entities really needs to think about returning it, because that's payoff money. And they're doing that to silence conservatives and to silence any effort to stop them from silencing conservatives. And I think it's an existential issue for the conservative movement. They realized when they censored the President of the United States, they realized they had the power to censor anyone. And like I said, it's not just in this country, it's happening worldwide. We're hearing from our equivalent of conservatives in Spain and France and New Zealand, in Poland and Hungary. It just happened in Nigeria. I mean, I don't know the politics of Nigeria, and I don't particularly care. But I do know that even in Nigeria, they threw out Twitter for interfering with the elections. So it's a serious thing. Okay, let's move to the big issue right now. Heritage Action, you specifically, were at the helm of the effort to stop HR 1, SB 1 or S1, whatever it's called. Explain first what these bills entailed, and then where are we now, given the vote the other day? Because there's a complexity there, and I think the public really needs to understand how serious the issue was and continues to be.
Absolutely. So it's probably best to start at the beginning to understand what the progressive left agenda has been with our elections. They entered this Congress putting their number one priority, HR 1, which is the number one priority in the House, and S1, the number one priority in the Senate, was a federal overtake of our election system. And this bill, HR 1, we call it the Corrupt Politicians Act because it does not do anything to support or protect Americans' right to vote and right to feel safe and secure at the ballot box. Instead, it has 800 plus pages of everything from completely wiping out voter ID at the state level, enhancing the role of absentee balloting, having a pathway for illegal immigrants to enter the country on, let's say, a Friday, to then be able to vote the next Tuesday because there's no safeguards against ineligible or illegal voters. And then it has an entire component that politicizes the Federal Elections Commission. It goes after every single state law that might be on the books that allows for safety and security in the ballot box. It overcomes all of that. And then the kicker, and why we frankly have been calling this the Corrupt Politicians Act, is it creates a matching fund where taxpayer dollars are used to subsidize the campaigns of elected officials. So me, a resident of Maryland, my taxpayer dollars could be used to bankroll AOC's campaign. I mean, this is wild stuff, and that's just the beginning of it. So this complete federal overtake of our election system, it's written out, it's clear as day, it's 800 pages. It passed the House earlier this year, and then it turned to Senate action. Well, there was a big markup in the Senate committee. They couldn't get it out of committee. It was stalled. So Schumer then used a springboard in the Senate called Senate Rule 14, which he could exercise as the majority leader to bring the bill, springboard it, if you will, out of committee and straight to the floor. And he replaced it with basically 30-word changes, very minor, think typos, in what S1 was. And so the fabric of the bill stayed the same. The intentions of the bill stayed the same, but they used that procedure to get around the committee. They put the bill on the floor last week through a vote called the motion to invoke cloture on the motion to proceed. This was a very wonky vote. I mean, Senate procedure is very difficult. It's very complex. But the truth is they are using that to their advantage to try to jam this federal takeover through, and then to do at the same time to abolish the filibuster. So the vote that took place, which was the first real vote that we've had around S1, was this vote around the motion to proceed, and it tied. It tied 50-50. So Manchin, everyone was looking at Senator Manchin. What would he do? He ended up voting for the motion to proceed, which brought it to a tie vote. So now the bill is essentially stalled. You could argue it's dead, but the reality is that this week was just a political theater by the progressive left, I believe, to show unity of Democrats. They were able to do dirty deals with Manchin to get him to vote yes. He agreed, despite actually opposing S1 and supporting the filibuster. So whatever Schumer offered him, it was good enough to change his position to then vote for this motion to proceed. So now we're at the point where I believe they will pivot. They will take some of the elements of S1, maybe the abolishment of voter ID. Maybe they take some of the illegal immigrant provisions, the FEC provisions, the free speech parts, whatever they take of S1, they're going to slice and dice it. And they are likely then to add it into a larger package attached to the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which is H.R. 4. And this is the last point I'd make on this. Nancy Pelosi came out 3 weeks ago and said that H.R. 4 has parts in it that are unconstitutional. Funny, right? That they would even be moving a bill that is unconstitutional. So she comes out and says, we got to go back to the drawing board. We got to rewrite it. Well, that opens up the bill for the redraft. And so the timing of this is not a coincidence, Brent. This is a systematic play on the progressive left's part to rig the rules so they win elections forever going forward. AOC came out and said that point blank this last week. She said the quiet part out loud. It's not for nothing. And I believe now what they will do is they will take parts of the failed S1 and they will combine it with H.R. 4 and they will wrap it up in a brand new package and try to move that this August, this September. All the while in the backdrop, you have all these fantastic states like Florida and Georgia and Arizona and Iowa, Texas, hopefully soon now as well, that are tackling their state-based reforms and trying to secure their elections the right way through the states. And the left doesn't like that. So they're using the momentum of the states to create this narrative that we are racist, that we are suppressing the vote, that we are Jim Crow 2.0. They're trying to jam that narrative as momentum, they think, in their favor towards this larger election federal takeover package that will come together this August, this September. So it is significant that we got through this first vote on S1. We should thank the Republican senators who voted the correct way. Fabulous floor speeches, huge statements of support to save our elections, to secure our elections. But the battle is not over. And it's going to continue as the year goes on. And the momentum that the left thinks that they have, they're going to keep driving this narrative using the state successes. And we need to be ready for it. We need to be ready to tell the truth about the state bills and to fight back against the federal overreach, whatever element it takes, H.R. 4 or otherwise.
You know, that's a tremendous explanation. I think we should always bear in mind that the Democrats, the left, they always have a political component to their thinking.
Yes.
It's not policy. It's policy, but it's always the politics of policy that they're looking at. And I think in this one here, I think you hit the nail on the head. They do believe they have momentum on this, but this is why. And this is where the MRC comes in, because we've analyzed it and we've proven it. If you look at the media coverage of this issue, it is stunning that the media really are the tip of the spear for the Democratic Party, for the radical left. They are echoing the talking points of the radical left on a daily basis and calling it news. So that those words you talk about, racism, Jim Crow, voting restrictions, you see that everywhere. The Republican effort to vote to restrict voting rights, you see that everywhere being reported. Those are the talking points the left wants out there. That's how they want to condition. They believe they are. And to a degree, they are succeeding. But here's the interesting thing, Jessica. We've looked at polling data on this. When you look at the specific components of this bill, and you ask the public what they think of the specific components, they're no longer conservative issues. They become American issues. The voting rights, voter ID component of this. You ask the American people, I think it's 85% of the American people believe that you should have a voter ID. I mean, this is not rocket science. This is voting integrity 101. So what does that mean? That means that the American people are on our side. But it also says the American people are against the radical left. But it also says the radical left is against the American people. And they really are. They don't believe in election integrity. This is proving the point that you're making. What they're trying to do is, Senator Mike Lee last night told me that what they want to do is to make the Democratic Party like the PRI in Mexico that ran the country for 100 years because they rigged it so that they couldn't be defeated as a party. That's where the Democrats are trying to go here. So the more you learn, the more appalled you are by what the Democrats are trying to do. And that is why the media simply will not talk about it. And that gets back to Heritage Action. Because I know the advertising campaigns that you're doing, I can also tell folks tuning into us right now that every week you're doing meetings with a coalition of conservative leaders. Everyone's looking at you, whether you want that pressure or not. It's happening, and which is why I'm such a fan of yours. Okay, so I want to wrap this up. I'm going to put a gun to your head. We can't see it, but there really is a gun, and there's a big red dot there.
Well, Biden may not let you do that for much longer, so use your gun wisely.
Or the way you behave, he may encourage it. Okay, but there is a gun to your head. You have to tell me, who are the top 3 Republican presidential candidates at this point?
Oh boy, gun to my head. Well, I would say Governor DeSantis of Florida has obviously been doing a lot from his helm, from the Great Sunshine State, to show that he's a fighter. He's willing to take on very difficult issues, illegal immigration. Just recently, what he's done to support the border and push back against the border invasion in Texas, I think is testament to how much he's willing to fight. So I think he's definitely in the mix. Vice President Pence is obviously in the mix as well. He's been throughout the country starting to meet with grassroots activists, with voters. He was in New Hampshire. He was down in South Carolina. I think we're going to continue to see a lot from him. And then the third, I think, is probably a tie between Nikki Haley, Josh Hawley, Rick Scott, Kristi Noem. I mean, it's kind of a big tie of everyone else that is vying for additional attention and a chance to share their vision for America, should they have the chance to run for president in 2024. But I think a lot of the attention is going to be on DeSantis. I think it's going to be on Pence. I think you're going to see more from them really in the coming months. And obviously, whatever President Trump decides to do, if he weighs in, if he himself gets involved, I don't have a crystal ball on that one. I don't know, but I do know that we're all kind of waiting to see what he does from his perch in Florida and how that influences some of these potential candidates going forward.
I hope President Trump doesn't do one thing. He was a master, unlike any politician I've seen in my life or will ever see again. He was a man who could control the conversation every single day. And every single day, whatever he wanted to talk about was the news of the day. I've never seen any politician be able to do that. Someone did a study, which I found fascinating, asking the question, what's the most powerful show on television today. And the conclusion was the one that you would never expect. They said Fox and Friends. Why Fox and Friends? Because no matter what was planned to be discussed that day, the president went on Fox and Friends and said something, and that became the news of the day. And he chose Fox and Friends to do it all the time. But I hope he doesn't do this now, because for the sake of the country and for the sake of the Republican Party and for the sake of the conservative movement, he will tease because he loves to tease. But at a certain point, I hope that he'll stop, because his party needs to know in what direction it's going to go in. I think if he says that he's going to run, I think he wins the nomination. I think it'd be almost impossible to wrest the nomination from him. How he'll do in the general is a completely different question. But I hope he will make that decision and that announcement sooner rather than later, and let other candidates know exactly where they stand. I find this whole thing fascinating. I am urging conservatives to look at that candidate who is going to advance our ideas, not defend our ideas against this onslaught, but advance our ideas. I think the public wants freedom advanced against these people. So I wrap it up by saying, Jessica Anderson, thank you for being with me today. Thanks for everything Heritage Action is doing. You really, you guys are rocking the house. And for all your donors out there who are watching this, write another check for Heritage Action, because by golly, they deserve it. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Brent, so much for having me. Thank you.